The grand mansion stood alone on the edge of a darkened cliff, its Gothic silhouette illuminated only by the intermittent flashes of lightning from the storm rolling in over the Atlantic. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the murmurs of the world's most powerful men and women. Seated around a long, obsidian conference table, their faces were cast in shadow, the flickering chandelier above creating an eerie sense of movement in the otherwise still room. A man in a tailored black suit stood at the head of the table, his gloved fingers tapping methodically against the polished surface. "The time has come," he said, his voice smooth yet commanding. "We have delayed long enough. The threshold approaches, and our benefactors are growing, impatient." A murmur spread through the gathered elites, some nodding in grim acceptance while others exchanged uneasy glances. "The planet is suffocating under the weight of unchecked human growth," the speaker continued. "Our models indicate that without intervention, irreversible collapse will occur within the next century. We have always understood this truth. Now we must act with greater urgency." A woman with sharp cheekbones and silver-streaked hair leaned forward. "We are prepared. The next phase will begin immediately." The global health crisis softened them. Fear has primed the population for compliance. Another figure, his voice laced with skepticism, interjected. "Even with our influence, orchestrating mass reduction is a delicate matter. The resistance groups are growing bolder." "The leaks have been contained," a cold voice from the shadows interrupted. "Our control over information is absolute. But containment will no longer suffice. A new measure is required." The suited man nodded and steepled his fingers. "We all know the objective. A planet of 1 billion, no more. The Earth cannot sustain the reckless expansion of the human race. This has been the Order's goal for centuries, and now, with the Accord in place, we must fulfill our duty. The balance must be restored." An older man, his face lined with age and wisdom, exhaled slowly. "We have been patient, careful. Wars, famine, controlled economic crashes, each a step toward the ultimate goal. But the population rebounds each time. The human instinct to multiply is stronger than anticipated. That is why the next phase must be absolute," the woman with silver-streaked hair said. "No more delays. No more half measures. We will push society to the brink, and when the people beg for salvation, we will provide it on our terms." The room fell silent as a hidden panel in the far wall slid open. A new figure emerged, taller than the others, dressed in a high-collared coat of an unfamiliar fabric. Their presence alone sent a ripple of unease through the room. When they spoke, their voice was smooth but devoid of emotion. "The Accord must be honored. You have had centuries to prepare. Our patience is finite." The atmosphere shifted. The elites, who had spent their lives wielding absolute control, now looked uncertain. The true power in the room had just revealed itself. The journalist hidden in the ventilation shaft above stifled a gasp. The signal in his recording device blinked. Data transmission in progress. He had to get this out before it was too late. Below, the unknown figure stepped closer, its unreadable gaze sweeping across the room. "Begin the culling, or we will do it for you." A heavy silence blanketed the room before the suited man at the head of the table finally spoke again, his voice slightly strained. "The process is already underway. The first wave will be subtle: economic manipulation, engineered shortages, selective pandemics. Society will beg for order, and when they do, we will shape it in the way we see fit." The tall figure studied him for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "Your methods are inefficient, but acceptable. For now." Lightning illuminated the room for a split second, casting sharp angles across the faces of those seated at the table. The woman with silver-streaked hair shifted in her seat. "And if we fail?" "Failure is not an option," the figure responded. "You know the terms of the Accord. If you cannot do it, we will cleanse this planet ourselves. And our way will not be as merciful." The suited man's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "We understand. The balance will be restored." Above them, the journalist steadied his breath. His fingers trembled as he adjusted his device, ensuring every word was recorded. This was bigger than he ever imagined. The conspiracy theorists had only scratched the surface. This was not just about control. It was an extermination plan with origins beyond Earth. He shifted slightly, trying to get a better angle. The vent beneath him creaked ever so slightly. He froze, heart hammering. The tall figure's head snapped upward. "We are not alone." The journalist barely had time to react before a blinding pain shot through his skull. A powerful force yanked him backward, slamming his body against the cold metal of the ventilation shaft. His vision blurred, the dim glow of his recording device flickering like a dying firefly. Hands strong, unyielding, dragged him through the narrow passage. Below, the tall figure turned to the assembled elites. Secure the premises. If he has transmitted anything, sever all external connections immediately. The suited man gestured sharply to a group of security personnel who rushed out of the room. No leaks. No survivors. The journalist struggled against his captors, but a sharp jab to his ribs stole the breath from his lungs. He was hoisted up, forced to his feet. A masked operative loomed over him, pressing a sleek, metallic device to his temple. Did you really think you could listen in and walk away? Distantly, he heard the pounding of boots against marble. More guards. More enforcers. The grip around his arms tightened as he was dragged down the dimly lit corridor. He had to think. He had to act fast. Summoning his last reserves of strength, he twisted violently, breaking free from their grasp. He sprinted forward, ducking beneath an ornate archway, heart hammering in his chest. Footsteps thundered behind him. If he could reach the mansion's exterior, maybe, just maybe, he had a chance. A deafening gunshot rang out. Something hot seared across his shoulder, sending him stumbling forward. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his arm as blood soaked through his shirt. But he couldn't stop. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself up and staggered toward a side passage, knowing it was his only chance of escape. The guards were closing in. He could hear them barking orders, their boots slamming against the stone floor. A distant door burst open, reinforcements. He had seconds at best. He slammed his shoulder into a side door, barely noticing the pain as it gave way. He spilled into a dimly lit hallway lined with ancient tapestries and marble busts. The air was thick with dust and something else, something metallic. The scent of blood. He barely had time to react before he stumbled over something. A body. A man in a dark suit, throat slit, eyes frozen in shock. His hand still clutched a security pass. The journalist swallowed hard and grabbed it. He had no time to think about what had happened here, only that it might be his way out. Behind him, the voices grew louder. They were getting closer. He turned and sprinted toward the nearest exit, heart pounding with a singular thought. Get out. Get the truth out. A side corridor loomed ahead. He sprinted toward it, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. A flickering green exit sign illuminated a door at the far end. His heart pounded as he lunged toward it, fingers grasping for the handle. It was locked. Then the alarms blared. With shaking fingers, he pressed a sequence on his recording device. A failsafe, one he had programmed for an emergency just like this. The last transmission, his final words, surged through the network before the connection was severed. The journalist ducked into a storage room, his breath ragged. He leaned against the cold wall, checking his device's screen. The transmission status blinked for agonizing seconds before confirming. Data sent. Relief surged through him, but it was fleeting. The heavy footsteps outside stopped. A silence more terrifying than any sound followed. Then the door burst open. Hands seized him, yanking him into the light. He struggled, but it was futile. A hood was forced over his head, and the last thing he heard before darkness took him was a low, measured voice. You were warned.